Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our MPART PFAS Town Hall tonight. Tonight's topic is the Brooks Road and Laketon Avenue, Muskegon County area of interest. My name is Matt Tomlinson, and I'm with Eagles Environmental Support Division. And before we get started with our presentation this evening, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping slides to help you with your navigating experience. So I want to remind everybody that all lines are muted during the webinar. And we are recording this webinar, so you'll be provided a link later in the week. There are a couple of different ways that you can interact with us. You can submit questions using your Q&A dialog box on your Zoom toolbar. There's also a raised hand icon. If you raise your hand, we'll be able to unmute your mic and let you ask a question that way. And I'm looking over here to see, it doesn't look like we have anybody logged in via the telephone, but in the event that we do, we'll cover these question asking instructions again. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to tonight's moderator, Abby Hendershot.
Whoops. There we go. All right. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight and discussing the, there we go, MPART PFAS Town Hall for Brooks Road and Laketon Avenue in Muskegon. It's an area of interest. My name is Abigail Hendershot. I'm the MPART Executive Director, and that's the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. Happy to be here with you tonight. Want to just take a minute and introduce our team that you'll be hearing from. These are all of our experts on this particular topic. Tonight, you're going to hear an overview from Heidi Hollenbach. She's our regional lead for the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy for EGLE, and she will be doing an MPART overview. Peter Van Heest is our project manager and lead investigator for the investigation area around this particular area. Lisa Fisher is our lead toxicologist with a Department of Health and Human Services. And then we will come back at the very end and I will take you on a quick tour of the MPART website because there's a ton of information there that would be very useful for you to understand and know about. So if you have future questions or you want to tell your friends and family, that would be great. And then we'll go through, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. You can either type your questions in as we go through the webinar and the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand at the very end and we can call on you and unmute you, or any form or whatever makes you feel most comfortable. So one thing I will add before I introduce Heidi is part of the reason that this particular site came to us is, MPART has been very aggressive in some of the sampling that has been done across the state. And so this particular site is the result of some previous sampling. So Heidi's going to take you through some of the other pieces that MPART has done through the last couple of years. And then Peter's going to dive into the specific investigation, but there are associated investigations dealing with the Evanston Mobile Home Park and some of the other areas around it that are also associated with this site. And so if you don't hear the answer or you've got a question, feel free to ask anything that you might pop into your head as we're going through these slides, and we'll try to answer them as best as we can at the very end. So Heidi, are you ready to take it away?
All right, well, thank you, Abby, and welcome everyone. We really appreciate your being here with us this afternoon, this evening. As Abby said, I'm going to be doing a quick overview of MPART and a little bit of primer on PFAS, and then Peter will talk about the actual site information. So next slide, please. So MPART stands for Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. It was created under a governor's executive order to ensure coordination amongst the 7 state departments that handle PFAS. And
Heidi,
yes.
Would you please turn off your camera? I think it's giving us some interference with the quality of your audio.
Sorry about that. Is that better?
I think that's better. Go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. MPART also coordinates with federal and local governments, and is one of the reasons Michigan has been so successful at quickly identifying PFAS contamination. Next slide, please. So what is PFAS? PFAS stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, quite a mouthful. It is a class of man-made chemicals that have one of the strongest bonds in chemistry, and it's that carbon-fluorine bond. PFAS compounds act as surfactants. They are highly stable, and they repel water, oil, fat, and grease. Industry began developing PFAS compounds in the 1940s, and there are over 5,000 of these compounds today. Next slide. And one of the reasons we find PFAS so widely in our environment is that these compounds have been used for many purposes over the years. And here are some depictions of just a few of our everyday uses of materials that can contain PFAS, and includes waterproof apparel, such as rain gear, waders, certain types of firefighting foam, non-stick cookware, food packaging, and many other uses. Next slide. So why are we concerned about PFAS? What is the issue here? Well, PFAS are very widespread in the environment. As you can see, people have used them for many years. They don't break down easily, so they're very hard to get rid of. Some bioaccumulate, which means they build up in our bodies and in the bodies of fish and wildlife. Some may affect our health, and the Department of Health and Human Services toxicologists will explain that to us in a few minutes. And with 5,000 of these chemicals, we don't really know a whole lot about a lot of them. And there is a lack of national standards for these chemicals, which makes it very difficult to regulate. Next slide. So this diagram shows two things. One is how PFAS are cycling throughout our environment, in our rivers, soils, air, surface, or groundwater. And secondly, it shows where we sample in the environment. And one very important component, and one reason we're here today, is for the sampling of drinking water. And this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. Next slide. We are now also sampling rivers, lakes, and fish for PFAS, so we can identify and eliminate PFAS sources. Next slide. Michigan currently has 174 sites where groundwater contamination exceeds our PFAS cleanup criteria. And these sites include military installations, landfills, industrial sites, and airports. And we prioritize these investigations based on potential impacts to drinking water with the goal of protecting public health. Next slide. So Michigan recently promulgated or made into law drinking water standards for these 7 PFAS compounds with the goal of helping to protect the health of our residents. And these you'll hear more about these compounds from Peter. Next slide, and I will hand it over to him for an overview of the area. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Hi, I'm Peter Van Heest. I'm the Eagle project manager for this area of interest. Now that we've heard a bit about what MPART's doing throughout the state, we'll talk a little bit more about this particular area of interest. Next slide. So here's an overall map to orient yourself about the area we're talking about. You can see the yellow star marking kind of the general location, which is east of the city of Muskegon. It's in the southeast corner of Muskegon Township and southwest corner of Evanston Township. So why are we sampling? Well, we're sampling residential drinking water wells here. out of abundance of caution due to past detections of PFAS in the drinking water supply at Eaglecraft Mobile Home Park. And that public water supply was sampled as part of the statewide sampling initiative that occurred several years ago. And past results from that sampling included detections that were within the standards at the time they were collected, but would be slightly higher than what the current standards are. PFAS concentrations in the 8 samples collected in more recent years after those higher detections have consistently been within the current standards. And so we don't know where that contamination that was previously detected came from, but those results may mean that there's a source in the area. And what that source is or may be, we don't know. So right now we want to know if more wells in the area might be impacted by that contamination. And because all the residences around that mobile home park are serviced by well water, that's why we're looking at sampling those wells. Next slide. So Eagle has already mailed letters to the 56 homes in the sample area requesting permission to collect the sample. You can see the kind of a broad view of the sample area on this map, and the next maps will have more zoomed in views. But if you live within the sample area on the map and have not received a letter from Eagle in the mail, please give me a call at 616-439-8019, and we'll get you a sample form so we can get you sampled. Next slide, please. So this is zooming in kind of on the northern portion of that sample area. You can see Laketon Ave's, the road kind of running east-west through the center of the screen. That's Eaglecraft Mobile Home Park is shaded out in this because that water was already sampled as part of the public water supply testing. We're sampling these private residential drinking water wells that are on each individual own well water within the sample area. So this is the northern portion. You can go to the next slide. And so there's 2 maps here. There's on the left is zoomed in on the Brooks Road section. So we're sampling those houses on the west side of Brooks Road, directly across the street from Eaglecraft. And then the map on the right is zoomed in to kind of the southern portion there, across Evanston Ave, those homes across from the mobile home park that are to the southwest of Eaglecraft. Next slide, please. So what happens next? Well, if you live in that sample area, please consider returning the form to allow us to collect the sample of your well water. A lot of people have already done that, so a big thank you to everyone who's sent it in already. Eagle's contractor will be collecting the samples next week, the last week of July. And so if you haven't sent your form in, get in as soon as you can. We'll probably be able to do another round of sampling if you get your form in a little bit late. But please, if you have the form, please consider sending it in so we can get you sampled. And then once that sample is collected, it goes off to the lab, and then DHHS will mail you your results and follow up if there's an immediate concern. Heidi talked a little bit about the kind of statewide lakes and streams sampling Eagle's been doing now for a little while. Eagle Water Resources Division collected water samples from Black Creek, which runs south of this area, pretty close by. So those samples were collected in 2020 as part of an area-wide survey of streams in this part of Muskegon County. And the closest sample was collected at Mill Iron Road, where Mill Iron Road crosses Black Creek. And so on this map, on the right, you see a little picture of the bridge crossing there, but on the left is the sample map, and that BC 0050 is that sample. And low levels were detected in that sample, but they're below the regulatory standard. So next up is Lisa Fisher to talk a bit about PFAS and health.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Fisher. I'm a toxicologist with MDHHS, and I'm going to talk about some of the health effects of PFAS, and then I'm going to touch on some fish consumption recommendations in the area. So the role of DHHS is to work with the local health department. So for this site, it'd be the Muskegon County Health Department. And our goal is to understand any unique health concerns facing your community. So while Eagle leads the site investigation and is the one collecting most of the data, DHHS and local health work on public health planning and response actions if needed. You can go forward. Okay. So the main way that people are exposed to PFAS is through drinking contaminated water. There are some other ways that you can be exposed to PFAS, including eating fish that were caught in water bodies that are contaminated with PFAS. If you go to the MPART webpage, which Abby is going to talk about at the end, there is a page that shows all of the Eat Safe Fish guidelines across the state related to PFAS. Some other ways you can be exposed to PFAS would be through accidentally swallowing contaminated soil or dust, or by eating foods that have been packaged in materials containing PFAS. And you can also be exposed, it's in so many consumer products. That's another way that people can be exposed to it. And then PFAS absorption through the skin is typically not a concern. So this is a graph that shows some blood PFAS levels of Americans from the years 2000 to 2014. And in 2002, some manufacturers started decreasing their use of PFOS, which you can see reflected in the blood levels between the years 2000 and 2004. And the manufacturers have replaced the use of PFOS and PFOA with other PFAS compounds. Like Heidi said, it's a class of over 5,000 different compounds. So a lot of manufacturers have chosen to use some PFAS that have a shorter chain, which basically means they're supposed to have a shorter half-life in the human body. But because these compounds, the science is still emerging on them, we don't have as much data on any health effects associated with those shorter chain, newer PFAS compounds. So we have the most information about human health outcomes associated with PFOA and or PFOS exposure. And that includes reduced fertility, high blood pressure or preeclampsia in pregnant women, small decreases in infant birth weight, and higher cholesterol, specifically total and LDL cholesterol. It also includes changes to thyroids, liver damage, a decreased immune response to vaccines, and for PFOA exposure, developing certain types of cancer, such as kidney and testicular cancer. And it's important to note that, some of these health effects occurred at very high levels of exposure. And, just because someone has been exposed to high levels of PFAS doesn't necessarily mean that they will develop these health effects. It just means that they're more likely to, compared to someone who has not had that high level of exposure. So Peter talked about collecting some residential well water samples. And so DHHS will get those results as well. And we're going to be looking at the individual well results from each home, as well as the well results collectively from the area. And then we're also going to be relying on Eagle for any other site-specific information that they may know, such as if there's a known or suspected source in the area, what the local geology is like. And we take that information into consideration when looking at all of the data. But something that we use when we're looking at the well water results are the DHHS comparison values. And the comparison values are the lowest of 2 health-based screening levels. And when I say health-based, it means that they're set to protect everyone, including sensitive populations. So that would include fetuses and breastfed babies. And this shows the comparison values on this slide. Most of them come from the public health drinking water, or I'm sorry, the maximum contaminant levels. And then we also have one that comes from the public health drinking water screening levels. So when we're looking at the residential well results, we typically offer a point of use filter to any homes that have PFAS detections that exceed any of those comparison values that were on the previous slide. So when I say a point of use filter, it's basically a filter that goes under your kitchen sink. And then there's a little spout that comes out of the top of your kitchen sink that has filtered water. So any home that is above any of the comparison values, we will offer one of those point of use filters. They are certified to reduce PFAS. And then we kind of have two different scenarios here. So if we look to the one to the left, we have a house in the middle that has some PFAS detections. They don't exceed any of our comparison values, and they're surrounded by homes that don't have any detections. So if we don't have any other information that makes us think that there's a public health concern, then we may not offer that home in the middle a point of use filter if we determine that, those levels are not going to exceed any of the comparison values in the future. If we look to the diagram to the right, we have the same home, levels are not exceeding the comparison values, but it's surrounded by homes that are. In that case, we probably are going to offer that home in the middle a point of use filter, just as an added precaution in case those levels fluctuate over time, or there's any other information, that gives us pause. We would offer them a filter just as an extra precaution. So Eagle also collects site-specific information that helps DHHS and local health determine what public health response actions are necessary. And some of that site-specific information that helps us is if there's a known or suspected source in the area, what the geology is like, how deep are the wells in the area, and then what is in the ground. Is it sand? Is it clay? Is there a clay layer that's going to prevent PFAS from moving down into the aquifer? And then what does the groundwater look like? Which direction is it moving in? And where could a PFAS plume possibly be heading to next? And so that helps us determine if there's any other homes, besides these 56 that we sent letters to. When we get the first round of sampling results back, we may decide, well, we need to sample more homes to the south or to the east or, over here. So that just is all the information that we use to investigate further if needed. So we're going to be working with Eagle to, collect and look at all of this data. And, if the well water results, if none of them exceed the comparison values, that's great. And if there's no other information that gives us pause for public health concerns, we may determine that no actions are necessary. Like I said, if homes exceed any of the comparison values, we're going to provide that point of use filter that I talked about to protect residents from any high levels of PFAS in their water. And that's designed to be an interim measure. It's not a permanent solution. It's just to protect the residents while the investigation is ongoing and until a permanent solution is in place. And then we will be sending out the results letters for those well water results. And we'll also provide some educational material that talks about PFAS in drinking water. And then I'm just going to touch on our fish consumption guidelines because Black Creek is nearby. Fish from Black Creek have not been tested for PFAS yet, but I did want to throw up these fish consumption guidelines that we have for Black Creek. There's already pretty restrictive guidelines in place due to PCB issues in the area. So I just wanted you to be aware that we do have fish consumption guidelines in place for carp and suckers coming out of Black Creek as well. And then I am going to hand it back over to Eagle.
Oops. All right, thanks, Lisa. Let's go on to, and I just want to highlight as we come off of this slide, this Eat Safe Fish Guide is really an important piece of information. If you do any fishing, you have any family who does fishing, please make sure they know about the Eat Safe Fish Guide. It's a guideline for the state for consumption of fish, where they've been tested for a variety of different contaminants, not just PFAS, and then the water bodies and the servings per month based on the type of fish and what types of contaminants they tend to accumulate. So important information. The other thing I will mention real quick is that MPART, one of the key pieces of MPART is our Citizens Advisory Work Group. We have a group of residents from different impacted communities across the state that all come together once a month to work with MPART on recommendations on how to better engage and empower communities and how to educate, how do we go about making sure that all of our public understands what PFAS is, what kinds of potential risks they may be at, and just do a better job of communicating that. So our Citizen Advisory Work Group is open to the public, and I will show you on the next slide where that's at. MPART is made up of 7 different agencies, departments within the state of Michigan. And so I will see if we can get to this one. You can go to the MPART website and you should be seeing my screen. So here is the MPART website. If you can't see that, somebody let me know. And so this is our landing page. MPART PFAS Action Response Team has a variety of different things. We just talked about PFAS in fish. So here you can go and check out the consumption guidelines for fish. Here's our Eat Safe Fish guidelines. There's also an investigations page, which has, this is an area of interest yet, because at this point we don't know if we actually have groundwater contamination, but we still need additional information. First one up on the area of interest is this Brooks Road and Laketon Avenue, Muskegon. You click that and you can get the information. It's loading. Here's the map that Peter showed earlier today. And then as Peter gets the sampling done and actually has results, he will update this website with additional points on next steps, what the sampling might have shown. And then we will also be posting a copy of this public meeting to this website, so that if your friends and neighbors suddenly want some information, you can say, look, you can go watch the town hall yourself. Easy as that. The other thing I will say is, like I said, you go back to the main landing page. There is a ton of information here for, here's our Citizens Advisory Work Group if you want to become a member or just sit in our advisory work group. Their public meetings are all listed on the calendar. They're open to the public. Anybody and everybody is invited. Also have a PFAS 101, what every homeowner should know, some video there, and then some additional information for private drinking water well owners on PFAS. So a lot of information on this particular website, which we think is really important for you to see. So I'm going to stop out of this, go back to resharing my, let's do that. Okay, so here's this. So now we're going to go back. Matt, you want to lead us back through the how to ask a question in Zoom so we can get to our questions and answers.
Yeah, we currently do not have any at the moment, but if you're interested in asking a question, a couple of different ways you can do that. You can use the Zoom Q&A function, open that up, type your question in there, and then enter, submit it that way. You can also raise your hand, click on the raised hand feature, and we can unmute your mic and you can ask your question live. And then I don't see anybody on the telephone. We've only got about 7 people that are logged in as attendees. So, but in the event somebody does call in, it's just #2, and that will allow us to identify who's raised their hand on the phone, and then we can unmute the microphone.
Yep, excellent. And I do see that we have a couple members of our Citizens Advisory Work Group on. So if they've got any questions that they think residents in this area would want to know, they can go ahead and type those in, and we can answer questions that way. Otherwise, if there are people who watch this video at a later time, feel free to definitely reach out to any member of this panel and either by email, by phone, however you want to do it, and we're happy to answer questions. So let's see if we've got anybody typing a question or raising a hand then.
All right, we've got a hand up. So Tanya, I'm gonna go ahead and it looks like you're using an older version, so I have to make you a panelist, but you should be able to unmute your mic right now.
Hello. I have a question, a couple of questions. One is, are there concerns for showering? I know you mentioned a point of use filter, but what about people who take baths and shower? And what about other water faucets in the home? So there would just be one faucet that had a filter?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, skin contact with PFAS in water is typically not a concern. It would have to be at very, very high levels before that would be a concern. And at that point, we would be more concerned about, drinking that water. So at the levels that we've seen across the state, I don't think we've seen any levels that have, been anywhere close to where we would be concerned about skin contact. So showering, bathing, cleaning your dishes, we really don't have any concern with that. And then for the point of use filter, yeah, we do offer one to go under a kitchen sink. Depending on your home, if there's another sink that you use very frequently to get drinking water from, I'm sure we could provide a filter in that scenario as well.
Well, and I gather you're saying there is no like volatilizing or anything and inhalation. I just would be concerned if I was in a home with little children, if they were washing their hands or showering in water, probably because of the unknowns.
Yeah, and like I said, the levels would have to be like extremely high, and we just haven't seen that here. So at this point, we really don't have any concern for adults or children that would be bathing or showering in water.
Do you have information about that on the website?
I'm sure we do. I think it might be under our frequently asked questions tab.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it real quick. So I do believe that it's going to be under health. And then there are, so there's PFAS in drinking water, exposure. So there's a couple of different things here, as well as, let's see if it's in, visit our FAQs for more information. So I think it's in I think she's right. I think it's in this section right here.
Okay, I will check that. I'm just interested in seeing the data that supports that. And then I had a question, and it's probably not related specifically to the residential well sampling, but you had mentioned that the levels in Eaglecraft are lower than they were when they were originally sampled.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the original sampling, they have two wells at Eaglecraft, and the original sample, they originally sampled both wells that supply that mobile home park. One well was shallower, did come up with a higher level, but not above the 70 part per trillion that was in place at that time. And so it was resampled, and then they have basically stopped using the shallower well and gone to the deeper well. And so now all of the mobile home park is supplied with that well. And Ian, you can correct me if that's not entirely true. Ian Smith is our drinking water expert.
So they're not using.
That sounds accurate, Abby.
Yeah, so the levels that they have, there's still some detections, but they're all below the maximum contaminant levels, the MCLs for drinking water standards. So they're currently, am I going to say this correctly, Ian? Currently say they're all in compliance right now?
They are currently in compliance. That is correct. Thanks, Abby.
Yeah.
But they are only using the deep well. They're not using okay.
Yes, yes, but it's based on that information that we thought it was important to expand out the investigation and understand, because, you know, it's one data point. You can only get so much information from one data point. We really wanted to make sure we understood what it meant and if it was affecting any of the other area residents. So hence why we've been out requesting access and hoping that we can get enough people to participate to get a better picture of what's going on.
And so the entire mobile home park is supplied by one well.
Yes, that's what I understand.
Okay, and then is there information on that later sampling?
And so if you go under the testing tab here on this, you will see a drinking water tab. And then under drinking water, there are, yes, public water supplies. And then it's going to be under, there's going to be information in two different areas. So you've got the phase 1 testing. So you'll have some information here for EgoCraft, and then some additional testing under, I want to say it's under the quarterly monitoring, Ian, right?
So Abby, there's a few different spots you can pull up. So the phase 1 over there on the left will have the original sample. Quarterly monitoring will have some more from 2019 through 2020. And then there is a third spot you can look if you go back one page and go down to compliance monitoring. So once the MCLs went into effect in August of 2020, supplies began to sample on their own under compliance monitoring. So those results can be found on that page. So prior to August of 2020, we were doing the sampling. After August of 2020, the supplies. So those results should be there.
So there's Arlington Woods. There's the results for EgoCraft. Pretty much anything in Muskegon that's, you know, handled by the Community Water Supply Regulations for Safe Drinking Water Act are here. And so you can either download the entire data set if you want to get really geeky and play with the spreadsheet, or you can search just by, you know, searching it that way and look at those results. So EgoCraft currently is got a hit of PFH excess. And I'm assuming if you go.
Yep, click the plus and there you go. Everything pops up.
And you got everything else. So they've got PFOA at 4 and PFOS at 4. So you've got all your data.
And 4 is something that's considered drinkable.
Yes. If we go back to the presentation, let me go back to that real quick. You will recall that the standards for PFOA are 8 and PFOS are 16. So it used to be a combination of the two, was 70 parts per trillion. Now they're single numbers, but based on the toxicological data and the advice and input of all of our scientific experts and academic experts, as well as the input of DHHS. These are the numbers that we come up with. Now DHHS has a slightly lower for PFOS, so they're 8 and 8, but they're still half of what or twice as much as what we've got for the concentrations in EgoCraft.
And then EgoCraft has to supply quarterly monitoring reports.
Right now, they are currently in the compliance mode. So, Ian, you want to talk about how often they're doing that? Is that still quarterly?
Sorry, I had to find my mute button there. My understanding, and this would need to be verified with the district analyst, with detections, they would have originally been on quarterly, but because those detections are below the MCLs, they may have been deemed consistently and reliably below the MCLs. If that was the case, they would move to annual monitoring, but I don't know their current status. I would have to get back with you on that.
Mhm.
I would appreciate knowing that, just considering that source is unknown, I would kind of hate to see them, you know, drawing back from that monitoring.
Mhm.
Sure.
Well, and that's a good point, Tanya. We're going to use whatever data Peter comes up with from this sampling effort here. We'll use then, DHHS will continue to be in the loop. Drinking water will continue to be in the loop. Surface water will continue to be in the loop. Anything Peter finds here for this investigation along the edges of, you know, Eaglecraft and Arlington Woods will help determine next steps and whether or not we're going to step out, you know, to the west, to the east, to the south, and basically inform our next steps so we understand what might be going on. So we'll keep a close eye on it. Peter should, depending on when he gets enough people. We've been having some trouble with getting access. And so anything you can do to spread the message and, work with any kind of community members to make sure people actually give us access so we can sample their wells would be greatly appreciated. We've only been getting, sometimes not even 50% participation in our request for sampling. So.
Well, I don't know. I don't think I know people in the area, but I know several families with children in the park, including my 3 grandsons. So I'm even more concerned than usual that the levels don't spike again.
And we've had, I think if you go through, you'll see there has been now probably 6 or 7 sets of data between all the sampling from that initial 2018 samples. So we're fairly confident in that deeper well staying consistent. What we don't know is anybody in this area who might be on a shallow well, what that means. So, so that's why we're going to continue to work with Muskegon Public Health as well as DHHS to make sure we can get the sample results we need to make some decisions.
Now, will they need to abandon the shallow well?
That'll be a decision once we understand the situation. Usually if there is contamination associated with that, private drinking water well, then yeah, we would ask them to go ahead and abandon, but not knowing the situation, we'll wait and see on that one. Ian, you want to add something?
Yeah, Abby, I would, you may know better than I do, but I'm not sure that well is out of use at the moment. I believe they've adjusted their blending to get to where they need to be. That is something I will need to double check with the district as well. I know somebody had mentioned that one of the wells may have gone out of use. I'll have to verify that.
Okay. Appreciate it.
That would be, I've talked with some people in the park who have said that the management seems to be relatively dismissive of the issue. So I would certainly want to be sure that they were not using that shallow well.
Yeah. And it might be an issue of capacity, but we'll have Ian follow up and make sure that he can get some answers for that part of it. Because I don't know that off the top of my head. So, and I see, Matt, that we do have 2 questions in the box.
Correct. We've got 3 questions in there. Let me just. You want me to go through and read those?
Yeah, so I'll take the first one. It says, has any sampling been done at Lomax Sun Chemical Thermochem in the past? There were major fires at those locations in the past. And Peter, do you want to weigh in on whether or not we looked at any of those locations for potential fires? I don't know if that was considered.
Yeah, so as far as fires go, that hasn't been looked at. I will say the Thermochem Superfund site is just across the street,
Mhm.
south of Evanston there.
Whoops, I think you're right.
So that's definitely a probably float or as. All right, can you hear me still?
Yeah, I think you're breaking up a little bit. You said Thermochem was across the street. I know that they have not done PFAS sampling yet at Thermochem, although that's been asked of them from Eagle and EPA, but I think the PRPs have not done that. And then we also asked, what was the other site we were asking about that he said no? I think it was the there's another as the SCA landfill. Again, I don't think they've done PFAS sampling at that one either. So again, with those kinds of Superfund sites so close by, we wanted another reason to get these residential drinking water samples sampled. So anything else you want to add to that, Peter?
No, I think that summarizes it pretty well. So the Superfund site there, the project manager said they had made the request. My understanding is that that it hasn't been sampled, but that request still stands. But as Abby said, with this many Superfund sites in the area, a lot of unknowns, that's one reason why this site, which had relatively low level exceedances, kind of rose to a little bit higher concern. We just don't know what's going on here. And so hopefully the sampling kind of around the mobile home park will point and see if there's something more significant out there, or if there's it's a more localized issue just with the mobile home park.
Yeah. Peter, do you want to talk about our initial take on groundwater flow direction? Because I think this is Little Black Creek down here, right?
It's Black Creek, not Little Black.
Oh,
Black Creek.
Okay.
So Black Creek is there to the south, and it flows east to west there on its way out to Mona Lake. Groundwater flow has been measured very well at the Thermochem Superfund site there just south, and not surprisingly, groundwater is flowing towards the creek there. Additionally, the wellhead protection zones for the mobile home communities there extend from the northeast to southwest, which is reflects that same kind of pull towards the creek. And so that's an interesting thing. I saw the question about those Superfund sites. It's definitely on our minds. There's a lot of unknowns that we'd like to have answered. But in general, you'd normally expect the source to be the opposite direction. Those Superfund sites are along Evanston Ave on the south side of it, and we'd somewhat expect it to be more to the north. However, with wells pumping or unknown practices, things remain an open question. So we're at the initial stages here, and our number one concern is always sampling residential drinking water or drinking water wells in general to make sure that no one else is drinking it. So we'll start there and see which direction the data point and follow up accordingly.
And Rick, if you've got news reports of the fires, please send that to Peter. He's the project manager and is going to have that information. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And then I see Sandy's asking a question. And this one I think is going to go to Ian. Asking if somebody rents in a mobile home park, does the notice go to the resident who lives there or to the owner of the property or management of the property on the well results for their drinking water supply? Ian, do you want to tackle that one?
Sure, I can give it a try. So Sandy, in a case where there is an exceedance of the MCL, it's going to be up to the supply to notify its residents. that would be that situation. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
But it is written, that's the way it's written specifically into the Safe Drinking Water Act, right? Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, they're going to have a very specific amount of time to provide. I believe it's 30 days to provide that notice. I see Sandy's hand is up.
Okay, can we,
Am I unmuted?
Mhm.
Yeah.
there you go.
So, sorry, I'm not trying to jump into other people's meetings, but this question came up to me. So the owners of the property get the notice. Are they required by law to let the people who live there know? And
Yeah.
If there is an exceedance, yes, they are required.
okay, so if there's a detection, but it's not in an exceedance of the MCLs, they would not be required to let people know.
Not under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and we
Okay.
would make an effort to post those results. We try to post all of our PFAS results regularly on the MPART website, so that folks can be aware of any recent sampling. There is a bit of a, since August of 2020 though, it's been a little slower going because in the past we'd been able to do that within 48 hours of receiving any results. Now we at Eagle receive those results later because of the way that the compliance monitoring sampling happens.
Sure.
The supply needs to do the sampling before a particular date. Then they submit those sample results to either Eagle or the local health department, depending on what type of supply it is. After that, they come to us centrally and we put them online. So we've been doing that on a quarterly basis as
Sure.
of late.
So if someone contacted me and I said they could go to the MPART website and probably look it up, they would be able to find that information there.
At least historically,
Sure.
if it is a recent sample, it may take a bit of time to get it posted.
Sure.
Not to give you more homework, but you're always welcome to give them my number and I can get them anything that I happen to have.
Well, that sounds like
on
more
hand.
work on your part, not mine, but that's good to know. So thank you. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
And it all starts with this drinking water page on the MPART website, which you go to the public water supply testing, and then it's going to either be under the statewide sampling initiative, or if they're continuing to do compliance monitoring, then it's under that piece of it. But there's a couple of different data sets just because they were so big. Eagle did 2018 and 2019, which is why we got the data so fast and were able to post it. We were posting data that was coming directly to us from labs. Whereas the compliance monitoring and the quarterly monitoring is coming in from those individual supplies who hire a consultant to go out and do the sampling and then send us the information back. In some case, we have to actually manually input that stuff. So it does take a little bit more time, but it's, the data is all here, and definitely, it's good for people to keep an eye on what's going on with their supplies. So
Thank you.
you're welcome, Sandy. And then we have a final question, it looks like, is wastewater tested prior to return into the state and into the waters of the state? And that is a great question. And the answer is yes. I'm not sure exactly which part of the wastewater this attendee is talking about, but if it's being done as a, let's go back to the presentation real quick. If it's being done as part of a NPDES permit, which might have a direct discharge to a stream, then yes, it's going to be tested and regulated. If it's being done as a direct discharge to wastewater treatment plant, again, that would be tested before going into the wastewater treatment plant and before the wastewater treatment plant discharges it to a stream. We're trying to get testing at all of these major points in the PFAS cycle so that we can better understand the occurrence and where we're getting PFAS. So we've really done a lot of testing with the industries that we think would use PFAS the most. So those have mostly been tested. Anything that might have an illegal or illicit discharge into the waters of the state, as you know, something that's leaking and they don't know about it, or something we don't know about, those things obviously may not be getting tested, but anything that's directly discharges through the NPDES permit process is going to be tested. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, feel free to unmute and we can help answer your question more thoroughly. Matt, do you see any more hands?
No, that kind of concludes that piece of it at the moment.
All right. So anyone on our panel want to say any final thoughts? Have any additional, I see we do have representation here from our local public health from Muskegon County. Kathy or Mike, you guys want to chime in on any things before we close the night up?
No, this is Kathy Moore, and just thank you guys for the information. I'm looking forward to working with MDHHS as we work with the residents and navigate any concerns or issues.
Perfect. Okay. I appreciate then. I think we are, whoops, let me go back one. Matt, you want to close us up then?
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us this evening for this town hall. I do want to remind you that this session was recorded and we will be sending it out to get it closed captioned so that we can get it posted out on our YouTube channel, and that will be provided hopefully later this week, definitely by the beginning of next week. So with that, I want to thank you again for joining and have a good evening.
Thank you.